Hi everyone, and welcome back to Intellectual Potluck. I am joined today by my lovely friend Megs.
Hello.
So, forgive me if my voice does this the whole time. I've been sick all week. But Megs has very kindly agreed to join me so that we can talk a bit about whether or not the average person can make a difference. And, sometimes we're only one person. We're all kind of like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. But we've both spent a lot of time working in the charity space. And so, yeah, I thought it'd be interesting to chat about it and see where that experience has kind of led us to. Because I think we see both sides of the coin with it.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
For the sake of the conversation, we're probably going to chat more about societal impact rather than one-to-one impact. Because the one-to-one impact is important, but it's kind of like saying I've made a big impact to Grant's life because I'm married to him. It's positive or negative, but it's...
We won't ask Grant.
He knows the right answer. I'm not sure I trained him well enough to tell me the right answer, though. And we'll try and stick to the positives as well, because I feel like there's been enough negatives this week. We're recording this on the same week as the American election, and despite not being Americans, the feelings are real. We'll try and bring the good vibes only. So like I said, we've both spent a lot of time working in the charity sector. You spend a lot of time working with volunteers. You've done some volunteering yourself and all kinds of different, you do 10 million different things.
It feels like on a daily basis.
Yeah, all at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think it would be fair to say that we've both spent a lot of time working in a space where individual people can create that positive impact. Let's take Grant, for example. He volunteers for Orange Sky. Obviously, it's important to have volunteers, but him as one single person, I guess it's where, not so much where does that responsibility come in, but does it make a real difference?
I think it does, because I think what can get lost is that it's not always about that act in that moment that volunteer or that employee is committing. So whether that's, the food hamper that they're passing out, the load of laundry that they're doing, whatever that volunteer is doing, that in itself is obviously helping a individual or a family in that moment in time, but it's the ripple effect as well, and it's sort of twofold. It's both the ripple effect, I think, in terms of the volunteers, sort of space and their network, but then it's also the network of the person or the family that they're helping as well, because you can have it twofold. The person, the individual, the family, they're going to talk with other individuals and other families that are in a similar situation of hardship, and they're going to pass on, Rosie's are going to be in Brisbane at this location this time. Oz Harvest is dropping off food here. Orange Sky, they're going to take their vans here. But then also that volunteer is also going to be telling their friends and family what they're doing and stuff as well, their colleagues and everything as well. So I think it's twofold. You have the ripple effect of more people are going to be actively engaging in services to get help, but then hopefully, likely, you're also going to have more people actively engaging to provide help as well. So I think it's, people do think, I'm just one person, what can I do? But it isn't all about that moment in time. It's actually about the ripple effect in the pond as well, of how bringing more and more people into that space is actually going to create a really positive outcome, I think.
Yeah, which I guess is kind of how Grant ended up in it. He took the ripple effect from you.
He got sick of me talking about it, got involved. He's like, I'll shut her up by just doing it. Yeah.
Honestly, he threw so much shade at me the other day because I don't volunteer on the shift. Because I think he was chatting to someone so does your wife volunteer with you? And he was like, no. And they're like, oh, why? And the real reason is I don't finish work in time. But he was just I don't know, I'm just too good.
That's exactly it, though. It also doesn't suit everyone as well. Even my husband, I live and breathe what I do, but my husband is very rarely sort of actively volunteering or engaging, though he does it when I get very desperate. But his sort of view on it is his way of contributing to the cause is by actually propping me up and making sure I keep going. So it's not necessarily directly contributing by being hands-on, but it's making sure that the people that are able to keep doing what they do, you know,
so he knows that you're doing so many things. He's like, if I can keep Megs going, then she can do that, and then I've indirectly done that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's sort of how he sees it, so which is fair enough.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about how if one person goes away and then they talk to their family and friends, and that creates the knock-on effects. That actually came up at my job. So we work with like very individualized support packages, and I was kind of writing up a case study on like a success story that we've had. And one of the things that came back was like, yes, we supported this one individual, but then the knock-on effect was also that they stopped bullying other people at school, and they were no longer giving their teachers a hard time. They were no longer putting a strain on the judicial system, and the knock-on effect was really huge. And I think particularly for people who may have been bullied by this person, like
it's life-changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really cool, and it's not a consequence that you think of when you first go into things, but it's what ends up happening, and it's really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always really important. I think if you're in a position where you have the time or the ability to sort of take back that extra layer for people when you are talking about this sort of thing, like it isn't just as simple as that here and now, you know, that in the moment or whatever. There is to everything in life, but particularly when it comes to when we're looking at, you know, different social justice causes or anything like that, there's so many layers and outer rings and everything that unless you're in it, really, like, you know, you probably don't have the experience or really capacity to bother thinking about it. But yeah, it's there. There's so many layers, and most things are much more complex than a lot of people realize. Yeah.
And I mean, I know I said we we're going to look bigger picture, but like I think it's like you can never like underestimate as well the impact of like even just helping one person. Like I used to be a carer, and like it's very real, like the warm and fuzzy feeling that you get when you've like made someone's day good. Or, yeah.
And same thing. When I spent some time living in the UK in my much younger days, I was a carer as well, and I worked with people specifically who had neurological sort of deficits for a myriad of different reasons, be that they'd had an accident, they had a brain tumor, that sort of stuff, and I had a lovely lady who I would go and see if I was on the shift for that area. I would see her 4 times a day. Her name was actually Megan, and she was amazing. She'd had surgery and which had affected part of her brain, and she did have trouble like communicating certain things and stuff. But we had a great relationship, you know, and I would get sent to that region quite often, and, you know, not just her, but other people in the area that I would see. I had a really great relationship with them, and yeah, she would tell me if other carers had come by, if she had an issue or something had happened. So yeah, just that one-on-one, like her and I, we had like a really great relationship, and I knew that by the way she like interacted with me and stuff, that she felt very comfortable. And yeah, it gives you that feeling of knowing that you've made whatever smaller difference you were able to in that person's life. Like,
and giving someone that confidant to have, it's really, really important, because you know, you never know what's going on, especially in those kind of settings, and like if someone has a safe space that they can go to, like it's so good.
They know they're not alone as well, which I think is a big thing for a lot of people, especially now in the current climate, with everything that's going on politically and otherwise. To let people know that they're not alone, I think, is a huge thing at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. There was something I wanted to ask your opinion on, and that I made a note of last night because something came up on my feed that got me thinking about it. What do you think of people who do a good deed or like give money to someone or something like that and record it on their phone?
I think it's tough. And it's one of those things that you could probably... And it would probably do you well to almost look at on like a case-by-case basis. You know, does it depend on who it is? Does it depend on like what they're doing?
So if someone was on the street and they gave money to a homeless person, but they're recording it as they do it, for example.
It's tough, like, because I think ultimately, you know, the outcome is the same in that the deed has been done, so to speak.
I did write that in my notes. I was like, no matter what, you've still helped someone.
Yeah, but then I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think filming it, for me, I don't know, I think you're just doing it so that other people know that you did it.
Yeah, you're doing it for the clout.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, because if you were doing it because you just felt that it was the right thing to do, you would do it. Maybe you would tell your family or your partner, but that would be that, right? But yeah, film it, put it likely, on the internet and everything like that. Maybe they're even live streaming it. I would say that there would be some probably disingenuous intentions behind it, albeit the outcome being the same.
Yeah. No, I was really torn when I was thinking about this, because the marketing side of my brain was like, it's good publicity for encouraging people to do good.
Yeah.
So like it could be that ripple effect. Someone sees someone doing it and then they want to do it. But then at the same time, if I was in a vulnerable position and someone came at me with a camera whilst like handing me money, I'd be like, can you fuck off, please? Like,
yeah. And I guess that's even it as well, in that you almost do have to think, because, sometimes you see things on social media and you go like, oh my God, that was obviously so staged. Like,
yeah.
Is that person even actually homeless, really? Or is that their uncle or their dad or something who's just put on a bit? Really? Like, I think we live in a day and age where some people will do anything for the clout, to be seen, for the likes, all of that. Like, even in those moments, is everything you're seeing of a similar message, is it all actually even genuinely happening the way it's being presented, or is even some of it bullshit and being made up,
Honestly, I think like 90% of TikTok is fake.
Yeah.
Like, and that's probably being generous. Like, most people are either trying to build up a following or trying to get a sponsorship. I never believe product reviews on TikTok because
it's all a scam.
Yeah.
It's all a scam.
Like, even if you're not being paid to create the video, like TikTok companies can go back in and buy your video. So why would you give a negative review when if you give a positive review, there's a chance someone might buy it?
Yeah. And even I find like, different ads and stuff you get come up on social media, half of them are snippets from other reviews and stuff of products that company has knocked off.
Yeah.
And they're taking reviews of a genuine, like using like Skims, Kim Kardashian's brand as an example. People go on and they do reviews and they film themselves trying on the shapewear or whatever. And then illegitimate brands go and take that and put that in their ads, and then so what people are seeing is this product, making them a human Barbie and stuff like that. It's actually not the product they're ordering, and it's not the product they're going to receive. So even the genuine things that are happening, people are taking them and ripping it off. Like,
it's like when you look on Shein and the picture is like, what you get is actually the photo of whatever you bought.
Literally. Or like something, there's like a product and it's a top and it comes in 7 colours and it's exactly the same picture where they've just
put filters over.
They've just filtered the colour of the item, and you're like, I'm not going to get that because that's not even genuine. Like, yeah. So I think the internet and all that sort of stuff, I think it's definitely all just one big thing to be wary of, in my opinion.
No. Yeah. I actively don't use TikTok.
No, I don't have it either, actually.
I mean, I do actually use it for the podcast, but I like take a minute clip of the podcast and then just like put that up.
Yeah.
And even then I feel dirty doing that because I
feel dirty.
Yeah, because I want to do an episode just talking smack about TikTok and then put it on TikTok and see if it...
I don't even have it. I remember I downloaded TikTok right when COVID first happened, because that's when it really started taking off.
Yeah.
And I was at home doing nothing like everyone else, and I was like, oh, I'll download it. I think I lasted like a few days, and I haven't had it
you're
since.
lucky to have got out when you did.
Yeah.
Like, I actively won't scroll. Like, I only have it for the podcast, and I won't scroll because I've done that once or twice, and I've ended up down a hole.
The biggest hole.
Yeah, especially like around election stuff. I was like, oh, I'm just curious what they're saying. And then suddenly your whole feed's that, and I'm like...
Algorithm gets ya.
Yeah, and like half an hour later, I was like really like angry for no reason.
And all the like US election stuff, and you're like, I don't even live there.
Yeah,
like, what am I doing?
I can't even vote in the country I'm in. I'm not going to get fussed about someone else's politics.
Oh, that's so funny.
Though our election did actually it gave me the push to do my citizenship. Because I was like, I want to be able to vote in this.
Because then at least, if you vote and it goes in a different direction to how you voted, at least then you can like have an opinion on it. Like, and that's what I always say about people that don't vote. I'm like, well, you didn't vote, so you actually can't have an opinion.
Yeah.
Because you didn't want to have an opinion then, so it doesn't count now.
You get fined in Australia for not voting, so you are making a conscious choice to take a fine rather than have an opinion.
Yeah, have an opinion, but then you want to give it later on social media or whatever.
Yeah. No, crazy. At the moment, all I do is like try and influence Grant's vote.
Do this.
Yes, but like I can do that and be able to vote myself.
Yeah,
later,
you can get
so
2 for 1.
For 2. Yes. When I was drafting this, I kind of split it into a few sections. One was like, I guess, the positives for doing these things and trying to create an impact. The next bit I wrote was like, I guess, the skeptic part, which is like when you are just one person and, you know, some things like such huge socioeconomic issues, or like, sure, you might fix one problem over here, but then there's going to be 10 other problems over here, or while you've spent your time doing this, 50 other things have gone wrong. That was like my skeptic side, and I got a bit depressed writing it, to be honest, because I was like, I've put in brackets underneath, maybe omit some of this, I started ranting. Like, that's my note to myself. Like, but one thing that I guess I think about more now because of where I currently work, a really common argument that I heard in the UK that I don't hear as much over here is people who are like on benefits or on Centrelink or whatever you call it in whatever country you're in, they get more money than if they would have worked. And so a lot of people don't like helping people because they're like, well, you're getting all this help from the government, and so why would I help you? Like, I've seen the same argument with the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme in Australia. They help people to have money to provide supports for people with disability. And a knock-on effect of the NDIS has been that a lot of disability support charities struggle more to get donations because people say, you get all this money from the government, so why would I also?
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a really tricky one. And I'm very left-wing. I'm very opinionated on all of it.
Me too.
I did that when I said left-wing. That's my right. Learn my lefts and rights. Left-wing, that way.
I think it's tough because I think you can separate those things into a few different areas. Like, I think it's only fair and realistic to say, like, yes, there will be a level of people who are currently receiving, you know, government benefits that are deciding or choosing that that's the best way for them or for their families. I think there's a much larger amount of people who are in that situation that aren't necessarily like choosing it. It's not their way of life. And I think there's a lot of complexities behind all of it. There's, you know, maybe the work that they're trying to get into or that they have experience in is quite specialized and there's not a lot of jobs going. It actually isn't as simple as, you know, sometimes people say, oh, well, just go pack shelves or just go and work at McDonald's. My husband did that at one point when he was getting ready to leave a job that he was in because for mental health reasons, it just wasn't viable for him to stay there. And he applied at McDonald's and they wouldn't hire him because he was overqualified.
Yeah.
So that actually happens a lot more than people realize. Like, it actually just isn't as simple as, oh, I'm just going to go and pack shelves at Woolies. Because you just actually don't get hired because they see, you know, look, generally as adults, like, you know, you might have a degree, you've got X amount of experience in whatever field, you're too qualified. They don't want someone like you because at some point they're expecting you to ask for more money than a teenager would, or,
yeah.
you know, so like.
Or maybe they're a 21-year-old manager at McDonald's and they don't want to hire a 35-year-old
who has all this life experience and is probably going to tell them they're moderately shit at their job.
Yeah.
You know, exactly. Like, so that's not as simple as that for that cohort of people on benefits who don't actually want to be in that lifestyle. Like, it's not as straightforward to get out of it. For the people that are in that lifestyle that are sort of willfully choosing to remain in it, I personally believe, and I choose to believe, that that number of people is much smaller, and it's so small that everyone else shouldn't be punished, shouldn't receive less money or have stricter rules or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I don't think that's fair, you know.
I meant to look up this saying because I said it the other week when I was recording with my sister and I know that I still don't know it. But it's like a few bad apples spoiling the whatever the way. It's like,
it's the mead or something, isn't it?
I don't know. I said
which
orchard,
is basically
which
like
was
the cider or something, like something like that.
That sounds more right
maybe,
than orchard, which was
something
what I
like
came
that.
up with. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
I know people just say, oh, a few bad apples, but I couldn't think of the rest of the same. But
yeah,
it's that same principle of like a few people who are potentially like choosing to do that or potentially like manipulating the system doesn't mean that the system doesn't have purpose and that it's not there for a reason. And the fact of the matter is, like, a lot of people, especially during COVID, a lot of people suddenly found themselves without jobs who were maybe incredibly qualified or had worked in the same company for forever. They weren't complaining about those systems then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, when everyone, let's be honest, everyone was getting free money during COVID, and really no one was complaining. I wasn't complaining. I wasn't getting free money, but I was on JobKeeper. Like, JobKeeper allowed me to stay employed.
Yeah.
And paid really my salary for until it ended, more or less. Yeah, none of us were complaining about it then, you know. Like, and we all could have sat around and even if it wasn't JobKeeper, if it was just the other one where they were just giving money for people to stay home, like, I could have just gone, oh, actually, I'm going to quit my job, and I could have just stayed home. But I didn't, right? Like, I was like, I'm all right, I'm going to keep my job. I'm going to keep working at my job, and I'm going to still, I could have stayed home probably, like in that chaos of a time that it was, but most people didn't, you know.
Yeah, most people don't want to either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to, but I think it's one of those things where people see, you know, a snippet on a current affair or a snippet on TikTok or whatever, and some people just allow those things to form a complete worldview in their heads, and it's borderlines on ignorance really, because one thing that you see doesn't define an entire sector or an entire government scheme or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many layers to everything.
A current affair actually drives me insane. My sister-in-law lives by it. And it makes me so mad because sometimes she'll like see something about Brisbane and she's like, oh my God, youth crime, it's out of control. Make sure you're locking your doors. I'm like, the kids next door are like 5. What are they going to do? Like,
yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, there's definitely pockets, right?
But
and
it's sensationalized.
Exactly. Yeah. If you actually look at the stats, because I saw something on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and there was someone who posted a bunch of stats about stuff, and actually compared to years gone by, all the stats and all the crime rates are actually lower than they've ever been, right? And that's exactly it. It's sensationalizing and people just latching on to an idea because, yeah, it does have this almost like hysteria behind it. Like, they're going to steal your car and they're going to break into your house. And it's like, actually probably not.
I read a police report that said the same thing. It was like, you know, there's all these things about youth crime, but actually back in the 90s, youth crime was this. And right now it's this. And there was like a brief booming hiccup in like, I think it was like 2007, 2008, but we're not there now. And yet with all of the political campaigns, youth crime was one of the huge things that was talked about, and that's just because it's something the media have latched onto.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just, it's like, obviously it's media, but it's also social media and how accessible everything is at every moment in every day these days. Like, you know, previously, and I'm talking like I'm 60 years old, but, you know, back in my day, like, you know, when we were younger, really primarily only when Facebook was still in its infancy and MySpace and those sorts of things, really the news was on the news.
Yeah.
You really didn't have such an influx of constant information and quite biased information depending where you're getting it from.
Yeah. And not at all fact checked either.
Exactly. And it's coming at you these days from all angles. Like, everywhere you go on a website, there's ads playing. It's absolutely everywhere. And every piece of information that's coming at you has an agenda in one direction or the other. And I think that's what's different now as well. Like, people think because they're hearing or seeing it more means that it's happening more, but that's actually not the case. It just means that the information is more accessible than it was before, but that doesn't equate to it's happening more often. They're two different things. Like,
and the sad reality is the content that tracks the best on almost all forms of social media is rage bait.
Yeah.
And you are going to get so much more engagement and so many more clicks on rage bait, and a great way to do that is to manipulate the facts and come up with something that is either scary or sensationalized and acting like the world's falling in. And
because people also use the internet almost like a bit of an invisibility cloak, even if they are operating under the guise of their, you know, genuine name and stuff. Like, Facebook, you can have everything locked down to private and everything like that. Like, people just literally do and say whatever they want on the internet as well, which, you know, are any of their comments or little tidbits that they're adding, is any of that fact checked? No, even less so than the original content that it's about. Like, everything, and then it just builds, and then people comment and people comment and people comment. And it just, it is this hysteria that just builds and just makes people insane, actually. Yeah. It just makes people insane, and it helps form political views and that sort of stuff. And that's sort of what's scary about it. It's like, all right, vote how you're going to vote, but vote based on being informed on facts, not shit that you see on social media. And that's what's scary these days is like, yeah, people, you just don't know anymore like what's genuine and what's not.
No.
Like, yeah.
No. And when people find that something works, like if someone has a piece of content and it goes viral because they've talked about a particular topic, they're going to keep going in on that, and they're just going to keep making it more and more controversial. What's scary for me, like going back to our original question of like whether an average person can make a difference, that's kind of what TikTok has like exploded. It's all average people who then either go viral for something random or have built up this huge following and have now become a TikTok influencer. They're an average person who then has a massive voice, but there is nothing holding them accountable for what they use their voice for.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fun. This is why I think I can do a whole episode ranting about TikTok. It's just
But I think as well, I think it's scary because when you think about it, like, I definitely think one voice or one person really can make a lot of difference, you know, depending on what it is. But I think it's so much easier to make a difference with a negative narrative than it is a positive, you know, because I think it's really easy, sort of like we were just saying, you know, like one thing leads to another and things on the internet often spiral within a negative context. But like when it comes to positive things on the internet, when they're positive, like it doesn't necessarily mean as much. Like people go, oh, that's so lovely, that's so great, and then they carry on with their lives, which is fine. But like a lot of the time it's, you know, reality is when we're talking about charity work and that sort of stuff, it's about either donating money or it's about putting the time in and physically going to contribute. Like, and that's a step or multiple steps too far for a lot of people. So it's much easier to make a difference with a negative connotation online, I think, than because that feeds political views and all that sort of stuff. Like, and that will stop people from going to help and that sort of stuff. Whereas like positive stuff online, people can see, oh, that's really lovely. And then they turn their phone off and they go and do their washing, or they go, you know, it's much harder, you know, to get a positive outcome from something on the internet, I think, than there is like from something negative.
Yeah, 100%.
And then like with the NDIS, like that's so wild. I think like, again, so many opinions, you know, because it touches my life personally as well. The people that have a problem with it, I think ultimately are people who have yet to be and expect to never be in need of such support.
They're fortunate enough to not need it. But
absolutely.
Can guarantee that if, you know, touch wood, let's say it's me and Grant, like either one of us could go and get hit by a car and...
You've lost your legs. You're in a wheelchair. That's it.
Yeah. And then suddenly I've got physio and
you need a
lots
stair
of different
lift.
Things. Yeah.
You need to move house. Like,
Yeah, we live on a classic Queenslander, so we only use the top story. It's currently not accessible to my mother-in-law, which I really like my mother-in-law, so that's not deliberate.
Sorry, Mum.
Yeah. But yeah, if that were to happen, we would need so many things that we can't afford, and we'd be very grateful to have that resource. Yeah. And there would be no other way around it. We also don't have family up here. Like, the other alternative would be that I would have to go and live in a hospital, and that would cost more money.
Yeah.
So, you know, the systems are there for a reason. And the people who complain about them, they're just lucky enough to not need it.
Yeah.
And to have never needed it and to not be close to anyone who needs it.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, like, okay, let's say you're right. The NDIS, it's too expensive. We're going to scrap it. You don't suddenly have to pay less tax.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how that works, you know, like, at least the money, albeit it could be done a little bit better than it's being done at the moment, at least, you know, however much of that money it is, it's being put towards something that means something and is like there to help people who, from that respect, they can't help themselves, so to speak, like using that phrase. And also, like, literally no one on the NDIS, in my opinion, is on the NDIS by choice. You, like, full stop, period. Like, no one is saying, yeah, actually, this is great. I actually love this.
No one's opting into disability.
Exactly. And the argument to say, oh, well, it's too expensive. Well, what would you prefer? Would you prefer these people to be living in hostels, having to crawl upstairs because they have no stair lifts, you know, not have enough adult incontinence aids? Like, really,
they would be the same people that would go and protest saying this is inhumane. Like, people just want to complain about
exactly
something.
And that's it. Like, do you actually want these people to be living in poverty? Do you want anyone to be living in poverty? But do you want to have people with disabilities like living in poverty and living less than human? Because that's essentially what you're saying. You're saying that these people don't deserve to live as humans like you do.
Yeah.
Which is like filth, in my opinion.
I honestly think most people throw out these opinions and they don't actually know what they want in its place instead. They're just like, I don't like this. I don't know what I want instead, but I don't like this
I heard
thing.
Barry at the pub say that his brother's wife's, cousin said this one thing about the NDIS. So now I'm latching onto that and making it my whole personality. That's what happens. It feels like.
The thing is, like, sometimes you hear how much certain care packages cost in the NDIS. It sounds like a lot of money. But there's a couple of layers to that. Like, the first is that to the government, it's not a lot of money.
No.
But the second is, like, so I now work in, like, the child protective space, and the amount of money that it costs for, like, even the most expensive people who I've known on the NDIS is less than it costs for, like, a year of a child being in residential care.
Yeah.
So the cost is all relative. The NDIS is much cheaper and much more efficient than a lot of other government systems, but the NDIS is the one that's in the news and the media and complained about. So
yeah,
and there's definitely things that they can improve it with, and I know
Totally.
that there's a big project going on in the moment to improve that and to fix some of the bugs in the system. But all that's meant in the short term is that it's actually less accessible for people, and it's a problem, which is why, if people can support charities like that, it can help to bridge that gap, because at the moment disability providers are bridging that gap because the NDIS isn't covering the needs. But then you have the Royal Safety Commission saying you've got to check all of these boxes, but then the funding only brings you to here.
Yeah.
So you're going to get yelled at by the commission if you don't do it, but also the NDIS won't fund it.
We've given you no way to close this gap.
So you've then got to just find that money, otherwise you're going to get shut down by the commission.
Yeah.
It's a problem. It's a big thing.
It's so much more complex than a lot of people understand. It's just not as black and white as people think it is.
And it's fine for people to not understand things, but people won't admit they don't understand things anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that in this current social media era that we're in, it's like everyone deserves to have a voice. Yeah, it doesn't mean you've got anything worthwhile saying.
And it doesn't mean that because you saw a few videos on social media that you're an expert. And that's the thing. Everyone is an expert in everything now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I can't speak, so I literally gave myself a podcast. But I very openly admit I don't know shit. The whole reason I started this was kind of the idea that I wanted to learn things from other people. I wanted to hear from other people about stuff that they know about, and then maybe I can learn something, and maybe I can
take that away and
maybe I can argue with them. There's some topics that I won't touch because they'll just make me angry. But that was the whole premise behind it. But equally, I also know that everything I say is my own opinion.
Yeah.
And I do some research in the lead up to episodes, but I could definitely say something that's 100% wrong and no one should take me on as fact. Never. But then you'll see people on TikTok saying, this is 100% true. This is what's going to kill the economy. No.
Yeah. It's a scary world out there at the moment, I think.
The last bit that I'm going to very briefly touch on, because this is the bit that'll make me cross. So when I was looking at can the average person make the difference, obviously voting came up. And there's kind of it's so cliche by this point, but it's like one vote, can it really make a difference? And the reality is one vote probably isn't going to sway a vote. But then the bigger reality is if everyone thinks their vote isn't going to make a difference, then lots of people end up not voting, and then that does make a difference. And I've actually pulled Brexit as an example here. Mm-hmm. So I lived in the UK at the time when we voted Brexit. I voted to remain in the EU. I know people who did vote leave, but I would say the vast majority of people I knew also voted to remain. And the media was very much saying, we're going to remain. Everything was leading in that direction. All of the predictions were leading in that direction. And then the polls came back and it was leave. And everyone was blindsided. But the thing that came out in the media afterwards was that everyone who wanted to remain didn't bother voting because they thought it was just...
Because the media was telling them it was going to be
Yeah, they were like, oh, it's a sure thing, so I'm not going to bother. And in the UK, we don't get fined if we don't vote. You just don't turn up and it doesn't matter. So a lot of people didn't vote. And like the people who voted to leave, they were very passionate about it. So of course they went to vote. But the Remain people were, I guess, less passionate, just like, yeah, this is chill, we'll just stay in the EU, it's fine. So they didn't bother voting. And then that changed the entire outcome.
That's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't know for sure if that's true. Like I say, nothing I say is completely factual, but that was definitely in the media in the aftermath of the election. And all of those people would have been saying, my one vote doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
And
it's good, you know, who logically, or how is it possible that logically enough people will vote for us to leave? So really, yeah. Ooh, I don't know. It's one of those things, isn't it? Like our system over here, you know, being predominantly like the two-party preferred, you've got Liberal and you've got Labor.
Yeah.
Really, when you look at it, it doesn't matter if it's at state or federal level. They're both kind of saying the same thing, but just slightly differently. And, you know, unless there's sort of key policies that you fundamentally disagree with, really, when you look at the two-party preferred system, like, really doesn't make that much of a difference.
They're pretty much the same.
They're basically
I've said
the
this
same.
about Australian politics for ages. Like,
Yeah.
they're both kind of, I'd say, soft right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't really have a left wing. You don't really have, they're both close enough to the middle. It doesn't make a difference.
No, and that's it. But everyone says, like, everyone always says, you know, people talking generally about elections here, like, they're both as bad as each other. And I think what's really important for people in Australia to start realising is actually not just two parties. We, being the voters, are the ones making it a two-party preferred system, right? Like, I'll say it on record. I voted Greens at our state election recently because it's my belief that when enough people start voting outside two-party preferred, they're actually going to have to start, like, looking inward and looking at themselves and saying, fuck,
come up with
we've got to do something different here. Like,
Yeah.
nothing is going to change until the people make the change happen. And that is, you're like, yes, okay, we're kind of forced to vote in a way. Like, but given that, and, you know, you stand in the sun for fucking 45 minutes, you know, to get your sausage sizzle at the end and whatever else, you know, love that. Love a little democracy sausage. Like, if you're going to do that, like, make it count. Don't walk in there and just donkey vote. Like, if you don't believe in Labor or Liberal, that's fine. Neither do I, quite frankly. But, like,
There's other options.
yeah, there isn't just two boxes on that form. There are other choices, like, and actually make your vote count. And it may take another election, or, you know, it may be 10 years, 15 years. But if there's enough of a change over a period of time, things have to change.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think that's what a lot of people forget. They just hear two-party preferred. They see the two little icons on the TV, and that's all I've got to vote for one or the other. You actually don't.
Yeah.
And nothing will change until you stop voting.
Exactly.
For them.
Like, the vote has the power to bring someone else into the election.
Yeah.
We kind of saw that happen in the UK. Like, we kind of have a two-party system. It's kind of, at least when I lived there, I haven't kept up very well. But there was, for a while, a three-party system where we had Conservative, Labour and the Liberal Democrats. And Lib Dem hardly ever got any votes ever. They were like kind of the joke party.
Yeah.
And then one election, I just remember they had like a couple of policies that everyone just resonated with. They came out of nowhere. They didn't win, but they were able to form a coalition with Conservative, and suddenly they were in a big position
That's
of
all
power.
it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before that, they'd been nothing. It was always just, oh, are you Conservative or Labour? Now it's suddenly, are you also Lib Dem?
Yeah.
And it took a lot. And, like, obviously they still didn't win because most people still have their traditional parties that they vote for. But you've always got new voters coming in. You've always got young people who are graduating to the age of being able to vote. And it can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Like, even if you are just one vote, if enough people are thinking that, I think especially in Australia, because you don't have to vote, but you get fined if you don't. So
yeah. I think it gets worse over a period of time. Like, I think if you consistently don't do it, I think you get in more trouble. I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think the fines at least get much bigger.
That sounds pretty standard for Australia.
Yeah.
You guys love a fine.
Love a fine.
But yeah, if you're gonna have to do it anyway,
Make it count.
Yeah. And I don't want to talk too much about the American election because it's depressing, but maybe things wouldn't be so extreme in America if more parties were allowed into the mix.
Yeah.
Like, America right now, regardless of which side you fall on it, it's so polarized.
Yeah.
There's no one in that middle ground.
No, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be like that. Like, even if they weren't ever going to get a majority, if you had a third party that even just got 10% of the vote, they could then have a small voice and be like, hey guys, can you calm the fuck down? And can we actually just like work on the country?
Can we just do what we're being paid to do? That would be great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
can we stop bickering for a second and can we go for a beer? Like,
Yeah. Exactly.
I feel like it's so dangerous having like a duopoly kind of thing. It's like Australian supermarkets, like you've got Woolies and Coles, and so then they two end up doing the same thing and just inflating prices because they have control of the market. It's the same with the politics. Like, they're doing the same thing and no one's pushing them to be better because there's no real competition.
All they end up doing as well is just squabbling with each other. Like, you know, I didn't vote for either, like, but you know, in the campaign leading up, I felt a lot of what now Premier Christopher Lee was saying was it just, everything just felt like it was purposely just against whatever the then government was doing. You know, like it was just, I'm the opposition, so I have to oppose. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. Political thinking aside, what they're saying makes sense. But it's just, it's so bitchy and it's so catty. Like, I'm the opposition, so I need to oppose it. And it's like, but if what they're saying makes sense, you actually don't have to. It makes you look better by being on board with it.
Exactly.
Like, it just...
And being the leader of the opposition, you still have some power. Like, you are still an influence in politics, so it's not okay to just say, well, I'm not in power, so I'm just going to bitch about whatever you do. Like,
exactly.
You could turn around and say, actually, that was a great thing that you did. I would maybe improve it like this.
Yeah. But let's like value add to it. Or when it comes to election, all right, like, you know, that this party, the current party has done these things. We're going to improve that, or we're going to make this even better by doing these things. Yeah. Like the whole two-party thing. And, you know, you saw it in America as well. It's just very... It is very catty, and it's just, it comes down to like a personal level as well. And it's just like, oh, for fuck's sake, like, we're here to run a country.
Yeah, like, I don't know what the ads were like in America, but the ads over here, hardly any ads were like, we're going to do all these great things. A lot of them were like, you'd have an LNP ad and it would be like, Labour is going to destroy this country because of XYZ. And then a Labour ad would be on straight after and it'd be like, the LNP is out to attack people.
Which is countering like what they just said. But and often they would target like the head of those parties and as well. But like, and I appreciate that the person that becomes the premier, like, yes, okay, they are the face of the party and everything like that. But actually a lot of decision making isn't even down to them. I know it may be different in other countries, but you know, the way our like parliament and senate and all the different levels to that, like, just because they say something doesn't mean it's going to get past all the different houses. And
they have so much less power than we actually think.
Yeah, but they make it such like a personal thing against a person, and it's like, well, just dial it back. What's the party saying? Yeah. What's the party policy?
What about all of the people that are going to be in their ear all the time? Like, that one person is not doing everything, especially in Australia. Like, if you have a federal election, the PM, I think, actually has so little power, and all the power seems to sit with the state.
Yeah.
It does not matter who's the PM here. Like, they'll deal with all of the international and foreign stuff, but really, like, the stuff that goes on in the country, it's all statewide.
Yeah. It's surprising the amount of things that, happen at a state level. And there's the odd thing that'll pass, it becomes a federal thing or whatever, but... Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I think is important to people during elections and stuff do happen at that state level. Like, because that's what's important.
And that's
them.
where votes you have more of a voice, because it's a smaller pool of people. Especially if you're in a small state, like, I don't know what the smallest state is. Probably Tassie.
I was going to say Canberra. It's a territory, so I don't know if that counts. But yeah, Tassie probably.
Yeah, does ACT vote like on its own? Because they have like the Parliament House.
Yeah, but it's federal though, so they must have. Yeah, they must have. But
they must have a state or a territory government, whatever they call it.
ACT and the Northern Territory, they're territories, not states. But I don't know.
I don't really know what the difference
means, actually.
is. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to be Googling this later, because now
they went out of their way to call them different things. They called them territories, not states. So that must mean something different.
And I've heard people like correct me when I've said that Northern Territory is a state. Like, people actually it's a territory. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, because it's like
I'm foreign. What does that
we,
mean?
we say the states and territories. We
Yeah.
don't just say the states of Australia. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's something we should probably Google that. We should probably be like, what makes it different?
Yeah. But like, let's say Tasmania. Let's say that because they're small. So each individual vote in Tasmania probably does actually make a difference.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
you can have some proper power there. But even in a bigger election, like I said with Brexit, if enough people decide, my vote doesn't matter, so I'm not going to vote, that changes minds.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we're pretty much done.
I think we've solved all the world's problems.
Oh,
there.
yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
is what we did just there. Yeah, world
Yeah.
peace is on its way. I
Yeah,
think.
we have fixed the world.
Yep.
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 I think we've concluded, in answer to our original question, average people can make a difference, and even if you don't think you're going to, you should try anyway.
Absolutely. Yep.
But yeah, thank you for joining me.
No worries.
It's been fun.
I'm happy to share my opinionated thoughts anytime, any day. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks to anyone who watched or listened. You can find us on many social media platforms. And like I said, despite all my bitching about TikTok, I do exist there.
We will be there.
Yeah. But I would much prefer you go to Facebook or Instagram because I feel less dirty posting on those somehow. And yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. But thank you to anyone who listened, and I'll see you next time. Right, bye.
Bye.